the Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It's Friday, March 13th. Friday the 13th, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my son, fellow investigator, fellow researcher Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of just incredible programming. For the first 30 minutes, we are going to be hitting hard some news headlines. Well, the things that propel the news headlines. And then for the remainder of the program, our special guest, Mr. Josh Peck, author of Cherubim Chariots. And that's his latest book. Met him in Columbus. He's a fantastic author, researcher, and just a dynamic guy who's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on. For new listeners, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet is hagmannandhagmann.com. You have to spell that all out. And we are, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be putting up some very critically important information here this weekend. So please keep your eye on the website, hagmannandhagmann.com. Want to welcome everyone to the program tonight. Thank you for deliberately listening to this program. Very excited about the near future of being able to expand our reach by expanding our studios. Hopefully that will take place here in the next month, and we're going to be doing a lot more with respect to video, a lot more with respect to audio that is unscheduled. We are going to be hitting some things hard. We're going into areas that the power elite don't want us to go into, and I'm telling you right now, we're loaded for bear. With that, Joe, welcome to the program tonight.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I am worn out, and
oh, poor baby.
No, but really, it's there is so much news we're going to get into, and we have Josh Peck coming on with us at the halfway through this hour.
But before we get started, let me just say I'm so excited. I love NatureBox. If you haven't gotten NatureBox yet, folks, I would urge everybody to try NatureBox. Portions of tonight's broadcast are sponsored indeed by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting, wholesome, delicious, mouth-watering snacks directly to your door. No need to change out of your jammies, especially if you've got the jammies with the feet in them and the flap in the back. No, you don't need to do that. You can forget about the vending machines, the snack aisles at the local convenience store. Start snacking much smarter with wholesome, delicious treats. I could name them. I'd be here half the night naming them. But for example, dark cocoa almonds, the pineapple rings, the cranberry medley. These are all just great snacks. Folks, support this broadcast by ordering a free, that's right, free NatureBox sampler box at naturebox.com/CFP radio. That's right, free NatureBox snacks are found at naturebox.com/CFP radio, or simply go to Hagmann and Hagmann, scroll all the way down to the end of the page. Look for the NatureBox area there. Click on that. That'll take you to our special place with NatureBox. So proud to be able to offer them to you. They energized us in Florida at the Orlando conference. They energize us every day here at the studio and at our respective homes. Yes, we are clients, we are customers, and we're thankful to be that as well. So that's naturebox.com/CFP radio or hagmannhagmann.com. Just click on the icon.
Absolutely, and we're going to start somewhere you wanted to start tonight with Hillary Clinton, Benghazi, Freedom of Information Act request. Judicial Watch sends new FOIAs to probe Clinton's secret email system. Lawsuits could follow in 20 days.
Joe, and folks, listen to me. People think Freedom of Information Act requests are the be-all, end-all, okay, of things. And look, it's an extremely important tool, but they can lie. Now, think of it this way: if you've got, say, you've got a generator, a portable generator in your garage, and for whatever reason, your neighbor wants to, thinks you have one. You know, oh man, I'm pretty sure Joe Smith's got a portable generator, and the power company's working on the power. So Joe, the neighbor, his power's out, so he wants to borrow your generator. So he goes to you and says, "Hey, can I borrow your generator?" You look at him and say, "I don't have it. I don't have a generator." You doggone well do. No, I don't. I don't have any. Well, I'm sure you do. I'm pretty sure. They can lie. And this is what they did. And I'm angry because I'm going to tell you something, Joe. I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm angry about this because, folks, everything we talked about Benghazi, we were the first out of the gate about Benghazi and about the real reason behind Benghazi to start a third world war. Look, this had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with a CIA-created video, innocence of Muslims.
No, and what they're doing here is, not to get too far away from the point, but you know, the blame of Benghazi initially from the White House and from the State Department was on the trailer of a movie, The Innocence of Muslims, on YouTube. And here we find out that Hillary Clinton, you know, has secret email systems that concealed her emails between government officials conducting official government business, as Judicial Watch states, and that by having these secret emails accounts, all the secret accounts should be recovered, searched, and gone through. It goes on to say
confiscate her servers. Confiscate her server right flipping now.
There's no way those emails disappear, just like Lois Lerner's emails never disappeared. There are various ways that these things are backed up. Trust me, none of your emails disappears. None of our emails disappear.
Oh,
at least not. I mean, they might disappear from our computer screen here and there, but they don't disappear from a database. Everything that's ever been put on the internet is stored somewhere. And people know how to have access to it, especially people in top levels of our government. This is part of a cover-up. I don't know if they're trying to derail her presidential run or what. I mean, it says, as with Benghazi and the IRS scandal, there is no doubt Judicial Watch's litigation forced the disclosure of Hillary Clinton's email cache, and will continue to pursue the case.
They had to sue them.
There are 18 lawsuits, 10 of which are active in federal court right now, as well as 160 Judicial Watch FOIA requests could be affected by Mrs. Clinton and her staff's use of secret email accounts to conduct official government business, they said. The 6 new FOIA requests are in addition to requests filed last week directly seeking Mrs. Clinton's secret emails. One, they are seeking communication between her and the employees of the U.S. State Department and or her representatives relating to emails sent by former Secretary of State on non-state.gov email addresses from June 1st, 2014 to the present. Records concerning the use of a non-state.gov email address by the Secretary of State, including records concerning security, classification, preservation, and compliance with the Federal Records Act or the Freedom of Information Act from January 2009 to February 20th, 2009. Records that identify number and names of all current and former officials from January 20th, 2009 to present who used email addresses other than their assigned government email address to conduct official business.
Right.
And it goes on from there. Basically, more communications, more records, records to identify policies and procedures in place to ensure emails that were sent or recovered by officials or employees of the U.S. Department of State who used email addresses other than those governmental email addresses, that those are searched for answers to the FOIA requests. Anything that is out there cached in Hillary Clinton's emails and anybody she emailed from those accounts, those records are being sought.
Well, I'll tell you something right now. It's my understanding that she's got a server, a physical server at her Westchester County, New York home. I don't know what's going on in Westchester County, New York, but I'll tell you, I haven't seen anything good come out of Westchester County, New York, as far as I'm concerned. But that said, it's my understanding that there's a server on the premises of her Westchester County home, and it is being guarded in part by Secret Service. And if I had what I believe should be done is the Secret Service people or whoever's guarding those servers should be arrested, and that server should be confiscated right now, yesterday. Number one. Number two, you put her in the hot seat under oath, and you make her answer the questions about her emails. Will it happen? Will Trey Gowdy get that through his investigative body? Will Trey Gowdy be able to do that? You know, if I'm going to tell you something. If he does not, now he's looking at it, but does he have? Does he have enough chain? In other words, he's like a pit bull on a chain, but there's still a chain. You follow what I'm saying? I don't have a lot of faith in the investigation that's being conducted. First of all, it's taking too long. Second of all, it is taking too narrow of a path. It needs to be widened. And thirdly, there's too many political alliances on his investigative body. And but look, here's the deal. Benghazi connects to Arab Spring, which connects to the larger agenda, the Soros-funded agenda. You know, Soros has got his monetary mitts into a lot of things, including Ferguson. From Ferguson into the international stage. But you've got to understand, everyone has to understand, and look at Benghazi for what it is. Please understand this. It was not some sort of October surprise about the blind sheikh. I've said this before, 100,000 times I've said it. It was never about the blind sheikh in exchange for Chris Stevens. That was not the case. It was not a foiled kidnapping plot. It was a war by proxy, an attack by proxy by Russia, by elements, by proxy groups from Russia in part to expose the operation, the CIA headquarters in Benghazi. Libya had to be overthrown for a number of reasons. Benghazi was the staging point. That and Derna. I mean, I've written extensively about this for this weapons running operation into Syria. The intent was to destabilize Syria and overthrow Assad. We have created 10, 11 million refugees from Syria already. Most of them Alawite Christian refugees, and we are now. I mean, we have created one of the greatest humanitarian, not we, but Hillary Rodham Clinton, Bill Clinton, the globalists, Obama, Rice, and every one of the Muslim Brotherhood infiltrators within the government have done nothing but destabilize the entirety of the Middle East in order to create or facilitate the creation of this caliphate. This is all a Muslim agenda. This is all the Islamic agenda. Benghazi. This strikes directly at the heart of Benghazi. This is a rogue CIA operation. Stevens was gun running. He was involved in that. The compound was involved in the people there were involved. The CIA assets were involved in training military and paramilitary assets to go against Assad. This whole thing is one of the biggest scandals in the world, and every time you turn around, there's some left-wing Marxist nut job who says you're seeing shadows, you're tilting at windmills. Well, I'll tell you something. This is the biggest scandal since this is the biggest crime, not a scandal. It's not even a scandal, it's a crime. And it's about time that Fox News, which is what Saudi ownership is nearing 15% of Fox News. If there are only hope to uncover the truth in this, we are in dire trouble. Well, we know that already, but I'm going to tell you right now, Hillary Clinton for president? Are you kidding me? How about Hillary Clinton in jail? Not president, but prison. That's where Hillary Clinton needs to be. And let me just say this too: I know of at least one so-called journalist who's out there writing about Hillary Clinton and advocating things, saying Hillary Clinton is guilty of some certain criminal charges. I will tell you flat out right now, if I could prove this, I can't, but I'm certainly on the path to prove it. That journalist is in fact working for the Clinton camp. How's that work? Well, it's called misdirection. Beware of what you read, who you trust, and what you think, because I know. Well, I'm just going to leave it right there. And it pains me to say it, but the level of deception is so great today, Joe. It is so great. It is so convoluted that half the time you need scorecards just to walk from one side of your office to the other. Okay, because you keep bumping into things, and in this case, we keep bumping into rogue CIA operatives in terms of our research into Benghazi. We keep running into journalists who are on the payroll of Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's right, or the Clinton Foundation. That's correct. I want to see open records and transparency about this. And Judicial Watch, great job. Last month, they obtained a chain of internet internal emails tracking the events surrounding the Benghazi attack as it developed immediately upon its inception. So don't tell me, and we were right. We were correct in this radio broadcast back then and today that that attack in Benghazi was a direct result from proxy groups, and it was planned. And I'll tell you something. It was never about the internet video that has the fingerprints of John Brennan, the Muslim, and the CIA. And can you believe in 2015 we've got a Muslim running the CIA? That's right. Man, am I torqued. And, yeah, it's ridiculous.
You mentioned we have a man in the CIA, the head of the CIA, who is a Muslim. He made some statements today, John Brennan did, about how ISIS and social media is the biggest driver of ISIS, according to John Brennan. There is a Twitter report he released here. The Brookings Project on U.S. relations with the Islamic world announced today the ISIS Twitter census defining and describing the population of ISIS supporters on Twitter by J.M. Berger and Jonathan Morgan.
Brookings, by the way, is a direct extension of the Tavistock Institute.
Yeah, they go on to talk, and John Brennan goes on to say that the Islamic State, what did he say today? Let me pull this up real quick. He stated that the Islamic State, ISIS, is not Islamic. They're psychopathic thugs. John Brennan, CIA director, today stood by the Obama administration's decision not to refer to ISIS as Islamic extremists. He echoed President Obama in saying that the U.S. shouldn't be giving the terrorist group legitimacy.
We are a captured operation, Joe.
He called what ISIS is doing inconsistent with how many other Muslims view their faith and said they are more like terrorists, criminals, and psychopathic thugs. Brennan argued using words like Islamic to describe terrorists it does injustice to the tenets of religion when we attach a religious moniker to them.
Oh man, you can tell where John O. Brennan's I don't want to make him sound Irish. John O. Brennan. You can tell where his loyalties lie. Of course, they're squarely in the Muslim camp with the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as this particular renegade in chief and his associates. You've got Hillary Rodham Clinton with Huma Abedin, whatever you want to call her, however you're going to pronounce her last name, who is directly related to members of the Muslim Brotherhood. We are a captured operation. We have been captured from within. Folks, if you don't understand that, please understand that we have already been captured from within. We have got to try these people for treason.
Nope. I'm going to be watching March Madness and sitting on my couch with the potato chips this weekend.
What's March Madness? No, I'm 56.
College basketball
I know that, of course.
And I think I say that because I looked at the calendar and it's already the middle of March, so I know that's going to be starting soon.
Well, did Obama make his picks or what?
You know, I used to even watch ESPN here and there, but I have not paid attention to ESPN in a long time, so I really couldn't honestly say one way or another. I don't know if the tournament started, if it's ongoing or what, but regardless, talking with some people, we've talked that and talked about this at length, that people who already have preconceived notions have or when you, let's say this, when you go to somebody and you have information, people don't want to hear it. You start trying to talk. I was talking to a friend last night and explaining that, how many of our family members listen to our show? How many of our, of friends do we have come over and are interested in anything we have to say?
Well, that's, and you know what, every listener out there knows exactly, because
our wives listen here and there.
But I'll tell you something. If you're listening to this show and you can't get your husband or wife or sister or brother, son, daughter, whatever, mother or father, you're not going to be able to. The reason being, it's like if you are an insurance agent. And how many times do you sell insurance to your family?
Yeah, this isn't a poor us statement.
Nope.
It's just a statement out there. I can't talk to my friends or family. Nobody's ever interested in or asked, what we're talking about on the show, really, no friends, no family.
Nope.
Nobody. But, we go to places like the conference in Orlando. Overwhelming majority of people, so nice and gracious. Everybody, all the listeners out there with their prayers and support. The people I talked to on the phone thanking me for 5 minutes of my time.
We are the remnant. Not Joe and I, but each and every
together.
one of you.
And it is a remnant. And, this way I want to thank John again for HH Connections for, this fabulous idea of getting like-minded people together.
Speaking of which,
we need to stay together. We are all we have aside from the Lord in this endeavor. And not our families, not our friends, are going to, have any answers or even, I would say, common sense guidance when things go bad.
Well, thank you for mentioning HH Connections. Okay. I was talking with a gentleman today from New Mexico. We're light in New Mexico. In other words, if you're listening to this broadcast and you live in New Mexico and you want to hook up with like-minded individuals, please do so. New Mexico is one of the states that we don't have a lot of participation from. We'd like to change that. So this is our plea out there. If you're living in New Mexico and listening to this broadcast and you haven't signed on to HH Connections, please do so. You will find that there is a thirst for like-minded people out there. And Joe, it seems like things are getting worse by the day. And I've got to tell you, I'm sitting here and I've sat here and I've looked at things today and I've gone over things and I've talked to people and the rift is widening, the chasm is getting deeper and wider, and we need, more than anything, we need prayer right now. We need to pray. But I'll tell you something.
We need to pray for each other.
Yes.
We need to pray for our spouses, our family, our friends, and we also need to pray that each individual secular person out there finds their way to the Lord. Each person inside of a church family, regardless of the denomination, finds their way to the Lord and becomes on fire for the Lord. Otherwise, people are going to be in trouble. And it's not until you diligently search the Scriptures, it's not until you take the time out to study history, to understand what the Lord is imparting in His Word. And I was talking to a friend, as I said, about, I went back and listened and read Genesis, and I got up to chapter 30 almost again. There's enough Genesis itself, you could write 10 novels on that, on the first half of that book, on all the important things that are said and the what's the precepts that are laid down by the Lord. I mean, the Bible is just a work of the Lord. Obviously, it speaks to you. The words come alive, and if you apply your heart to it, and you apply your heart to the Lord, and surrendering your will so He can take control of it and use you for His purposes, then you're on the right track. Otherwise, what's the whole point of this existence?
We've got to. That's right. And I would also say too, the Genesis 6 Giants by Steve Quayle explains a lot about Genesis if you're interested in the origins, and there's just so much that Steve Quayle has written about. My
point is too, and this is not a knock against Steve Quayle. He was really the one who was ahead of his time with Genesis 6. But I'll tell you, keep reading Genesis 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. True. There could be a book on each chapter of Genesis. And that's what I'm trying to impart to people, that it's just as, and like I said, it's nothing against Steve, but there's so much in there.
Oh yeah.
There's so much.
I used to think of the Bible as just a book, but and it is obviously a book. However, it answers the Bible is a true living.
It is a true. I mean. Like the progressives believe the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Well, the Bible is truly the only living, breathing document that the Lord uses to speak to His chosen.
Right, and we should. By the way, I didn't mean to compare that to the progressives' description of the Constitution.
I did.
That's wrong.
I did, because what they believe the Constitution is a living, breathing document that. But the Bible is, and not that it's living and breathing in the sense that it can be changed, but it can change you, and one sentence can mean one thing to you one day, and you learn a life lesson, and you read the same sentence the next day, and you learn something completely different.
Well,
and that's why
it's right.
I can read the book of Matthew 100 times, but the 101st time I read it, it's like I'm reading it for the first time all over again.
Exactly.
And that's I don't want to say magic, but that's the
power,
working, power of the Lord.
Divine power. Let me just say this too, because we're getting close to the bottom of the hour here. The folks in the near term, over the next 6 months, and I believe the next 6 months, and you know what, if nothing happens in the next 6 months, I will hit my knees and fall on my face and say, thank you, God, because the judgment of God.
Each day that goes by,
but I'm going to tell you something. Okay, we are doubling down. We are putting everything that we have, everything, ladies and gentlemen. We're putting everything into our radio broadcast and making sure the word continues to get out. CISPA was passed. That twisted, convoluted law.
Yeah, privacy killer. And Josh, I have you on with us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We
Excellent.
Hello?
Can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you in just a second. I just want to hit this one article.
Yeah, hang on there, Josh. Just
privacy
buckle
killer.
up for a second.
Privacy killer. The Senate panel quietly passes CISA, C-I-S-A, cybersecurity bill amid fresh surveillance fears. Dubbed CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, known as CISPA before, the Senate Intelligence Committee voted overwhelmingly to advance this cybersecurity bill meant to expand information sharing between the private sector and the government, though privacy advocates contended it only strengthens domestic surveillance program. A 14-1 vote passed the proposal with one lone advocate for civil liberties, Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, was against it. If passed into law, CISA would implement further protections for companies to gather threat-related data from their customers and allow them to share that information directly with federal intelligence agencies, including the national security agencies and other stakeholders and NGOs, and the think tanks.
That's right.
And it goes on to cite the Sony hack last year. Ever since the Sony hack of last year, encouraging of information sharing between corporations and the government has become the top priority. They say, of the supporters say, the bill would allow the two sides to better coordinate, detect and potentially stop cyber threats before they cause serious damage. They go on to say, however, privacy and civil liberty advocates have railed against the bill since its inception, arguing that without reforming and scaling back the NSA's current domestic surveillance program, it would only expand the breadth of power of its spying activities. And this information sharing, they go on to say the information sharing is only acceptable if there are strong protections for the privacy rights of law-abiding American citizens. But either way, CISA, CISA, has been passed by a Senate panel. It was formerly known as CISPA, and they're doing this under the Patriot Act. It's a new and vast surveillance authority that might as well be called the Patriot Act 2.0, according to Gabe Rotman.
That's right.
But with that, enough of that.
Well, Joe, let me just pipe in here. It's interesting. In 1877, Helen Blavatsky, you know her, don't you, everyone?
Madame Blavatsky.
Yeah, Helena Blavatsky published her first major work, a book titled, you ready for this?
ISIS Unveiled?
ISIS Unveiled. That's right.
I've read that book before.
Yes. Now, the reason I bring this up is because that's referenced in Chapter 2 of a book called Cherubim Chariots. It's in Chapter 2, and I don't know exactly which page, but I have to say this. I have in my hands right now, a book called Cherubim Chariots. Now, I used to think that
I got one.
Yeah. Well, these UFO phenomena, all of this was just people having too many margaritas, okay, maybe or whatever.
And I want to point out Mark Flynn, the author of the Hidden Secrets of the Labyrinth, wrote the foreword to this book.
That's a yes.
And he is his mind he is a genius when it comes to breaking down the secret societies, the non-secret one world government and the veils of deception. And Josh Peck, you've done an excellent job expanding upon a lot of the work he wrote on, and a few other people's work, really putting into. I mean, this is a very well put together book. It has a solid message through it. I haven't had the chance to read the whole thing, but it gets into unfolding who are the cherub, who are these interdimensional beings, not extraterrestrial beings, extradimensional beings. Did I have that right, Mr. Peck? Extradimensional?
Yes.
Yeah, and Josh, hold on a second.
Absolutely.
Hang on a second, Josh. I'm going to properly introduce you here. With us tonight for the remainder of the show is Josh Peck. He's just in case you haven't heard Josh Peck, we met him in Columbus, Ohio, during the Dublin conference, and you're going to be hearing so much more from Josh Peck. He is a diamond out there that, frankly, is. I really think that people, the Christians and non-Christians alike, are afraid of Mr. Peck because he is a dynamic biblical researcher. He's the author of Quantum Creation, subtitled Does the Supernatural Lurk in the Fourth Dimension? And Disclosure, Unveiling Our Role in the Secret War of the Ancients. He works toward waking up the church to the reality of the Bible, separating biblical truth from church tradition when necessary. He provides the solid, raw, and uncut truth of God's Word to any and all who are interested, and we are all interested who are listening to this program. He's the founder of Mini Study Ministry. And, folks, you can actually go to HagmannandHagmann.com, click on Josh Peck's name on the right-hand side, and it'll take you directly to his website. Josh Peck is a dynamic speaker, and let me tell you something. This man is a formidable foe against the satanic elements that are lurking all about us, all around us, and he is here to make sense of the very difficult or the very convoluted topic of the extra dimensionality, I suppose, Joe, of
the extradimensionality, differentiating between extraterrestrials and extradimensional, getting into what the different genetic manipulations and satanic agendas and hierarchy has been working behind the scenes, driving mankind towards the tribulation period, bringing about the end of things as they try to mount a battle against the Lord, thinking that they are going to take over heaven.
That's right. And I'd urge everybody to get every one of his books. This man, his mind is just phenomenal. This is not false flattery. This is just plain and simple. Let me tell you something, folks. You will be hearing much more from Josh Peck. He is going to be, his information is second to none, and he just has not gotten the exposure. He's gotten exposure, but man, shout his name from the rooftops and get his books and share his books, because you will learn so much about him. Go ahead.
Yeah, with that, Josh, I want to bring you on, and tonight I imagine you want to talk about Cherubim Chariots, exploring the extra-dimensional hypothesis. We've had you on the show before, and let's just get right into it. I want to thank you for being one of the first people to make a distinction between extra-dimensional beings versus extraterrestrial beings. With all the ancient alien shows on the History Channel and the twisting of Scripture to make it seem like there is an alien type creature out there instead of an angelic or something created by the Lord, you make the distinctions in here. Can we start there, and can you explain to us what the extra-dimensional beings are that you've found and how they differentiate or will appear or try to be sold as extraterrestrial beings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you again for having me on the show once again. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to it. But yeah, it's always a blessing to be on here and talk to you guys. On my end, you're cutting out a little bit, but I think it's okay enough that I'll be able to hear your questions. So yeah, I'm fine with just jumping in. And yeah, that was really what I wanted to look at with this book was the difference between extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional. There's two main hypotheses in regards to what UFOs are and who their pilots are. I suppose there's three, because some just think that it's our government or just Earthlings doing it, and that I think that's part of it. But the two main that drive ufology is the extraterrestrial hypothesis and the extra-dimensional hypothesis. The ETH, or extraterrestrial hypothesis, is way more popular and accepted in the UFO community than the extra-dimensional hypothesis is. The extraterrestrial hypothesis basically states that most of the UFOs that are seen are, and their pilots are from another planet in our universe. That's basically it. It's pretty simple. The extra-dimensional hypothesis, on the surface, it is a little more complicated, but I actually think it's a way better candidate, and not only because it falls in line with my faith. It does fall in line with my faith, but there have been serious researchers that have no biblical worldview or as far as I know, no Christian influences whatsoever, that have looked at UFO abductions and sightings, and they've come to the realization that it's most likely extra-dimensional rather than extraterrestrial. Jacques Vallée is a great example of that. So when we're talking about the extra-dimensional hypothesis, basically what that states is that the UFOs and their pilots aren't from another planet, but they're actually from a higher dimension. And I think the reason that that's hard for a lot most to accept. I think there's two reasons actually. I think first is because there's not a whole lot of understanding in the world as to what extra dimensions actually are, and because of that, people will rely on fantasy or the science fiction genre to define those, and sometimes they hit some interesting points, but it's not completely accurate. I think it's partly that, but also when you really look at what the extra dimensions are, it falls in line so close with spirituality and what the spirit world is. I say in my books and pretty much every interview that I've ever done that the term extra dimensional and the term spiritual are synonymous when we look at the descriptions of both. And so I think that kind of makes people uncomfortable too. But so I wanted to get this book together and to explain what the extra dimensional hypothesis is, why it's a better candidate to explain what people are seeing than the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and also what these things are. I wanted to write it in a way that non-believers would have access to it as well. I don't use a whole lot of Christianese in it, but there are some Bible studies and things like that in the book. But it's something that I believe a non-believer would be able to read just fine and not feel alienated or anything like that. I wanted to make it accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
And
you include a lot of perspectives from different religions, and I did learn something, and I actually had bookmarked the point my dad was talking about where you referenced Blavatsky. You go through Vishnu. It's a Hindu deity, you say, of preservation, and it breaks down into 10 avatars, and I never knew this before, and each avatar has its own distinction of what, when it's in place, Buddha being the last one. It says humans find enlightenment. And then the last one, number 10, is Kalaki, advanced humans with greater powers of destructions. And in Blavatsky's book, Isis Unveiled, she interpreted this as, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Dashavataris, as representing the biological, representing the progression of biological evolution. She interpreted the avatar list as the way the Hindus did. And basically, so in the Indian culture,
and
you have Indian culture and some of the Jewish culture, and you have people in the Muslim culture looking for a coming Messiah, a coming man Messiah here on this earth that we know in the Bible will be the Antichrist. And I never knew how expansive it was into every other basic religion except Christianity.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that the more I look into this stuff is the end time. It seems like the end time figure for most, well, probably all other religions, it's the Christian Antichrist. It's odd. I mean, when you look at Islam, and I was really surprised to find it in the ancient Indian text, because like you said, it talks about the final incarnation, which is Kalki, and Kalki is understood as being the final incarnation of Vishnu, and it's said that he'll ride a white horse with a sword that blazes like a comet. I mean, that's basically right out of Revelation. And that also seems to line up with the Islamic end time figure, especially concerning the white horse. But it's interesting how other religions their end time figure is our Antichrist.
Yeah, and if we can jump around here back to Babel and Nimrod and to the extra dimensional beings. When we think about the extra dimensional beings versus extraterrestrial beings and make that distinction and understand we're dealing with extra dimensional beings. We talk about you talk about the Tower of Babel and what Nimrod was trying to build. You say he was trying to build a tower in an attempt to enter heaven and or petition the fallen angels. And you mentioned that this is where God divided mankind and spread them amongst the land in different confounding their languages. And it says they worship these fallen angels as gods. So when Yahweh dispersed the people and confounded their languages, he did so according to the number of fallen angels that were worshipped instead of him. It was basically as if Yahweh was saying, okay, you don't want to worship me, but you want these fallen angels as your gods. Then you can have these over your own nations. Yahweh has always offered free will to humans and has always provided a way for humans to return to him if they so choose. Where was this? Where did you get that information from, if you don't mind me asking? Or is that in the Bible, in the explanation in the story?
Yeah, well, I first heard this particular interpretation. I think probably it was Mike Heiser. I was watching one of his presentations, and I picked it up there. But it's really just putting the pieces together. The actual verse comes from Deuteronomy 32:8, and this is interesting because the King James version renders it this way. It says, when the Most High divided the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. And so there's actually an issue with that last word, and I hope I'm not alienating, again, no pun intended, but I hope I'm not alienating any King James only people that might be listening. But in this verse, that last word, the sons of Israel, it actually should be translated sons of God. And a lot of other Bible versions have it like that. Even the Septuagint has it like that. The English Standard Version has it this way. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. And that translation makes a lot more sense when we look at the context. It's talking about when God divided mankind, which, that was at the Tower of Babel. Well, back then there would have been
that's before Israel was a nation. So, yeah.
And the very first time,
that's an interesting point and distinction to make. There was no physical land of Israel. The people this was post-flood, but yet there were still giants in the land, and the Lord confounded them and sent them on their way. But yeah, like I said, I've never heard them being sent on their way and having ahead of them as one of the sons of God. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think when we put that with like passages from Daniel that talk about the Prince of Persia and Prince of Greece and stuff like that, I think those are I believe that's actually, it's not talking about a human or somebody that was in charge at the time. It's talking about a principality or a fallen angel, basically, that's in charge over a nation. I believe every nation has that. I think the book of Enoch and Jasher talks about that too, where there was at the time after Babel, when God split up the nations, it was split into 70 different nations, I believe, and there was a principality, basically a fallen angel put over each one, because the people of the world, they didn't want Yahweh, they didn't want God. They were under Nimrod's rule. They were trying to overthrow God and even set up their own idols, set up their own gods, and that it talks about that more in the book of Jasher. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Very much so.
And if I can just jump in here, and then I'm going to let you take it, Joe. What we're talking about, and this to me is the foundation. You might, for those tuning in late, we're talking with Josh Peck, author, of course, of Cherubim Chariots. The reason this is important to me, and folks, if you try to follow my line of thinking on this, okay? What we're seeing here, when we talk about things like evolution and where did man come from? God created man in his own image, but so however, there are people out there who believe in Darwinism, for example. The Darwinian view of evolution is the exact opposite of what the Bible teaches. It replaces the truth of God's Word with an unproven fantasy, for example, the theory of evolution, which is really a religion, is promoted as true because of the entire religion of secular humanism is based upon it. So when we're looking at our origins, we have to look at things like Josh is talking about. And it is true that, and we can stipulate that evolution does exist on a microcosmic level, but very, very limited, such as it's possible for a particular species to evolve. For example, bacteria exposed to antibiotic becoming more resistant. So that is microevolution. So, but they don't evolve into a brand new species. Nowhere in history is there any proof of any one species has evolved into another, and so on. And when you see photograph or pictures, posters in your child's school, those posters of a man evolving from a fish through various kinds of apes and monkeys and becoming a Homo sapiens. That's just complete bunk. It's mythology. Scientists and biologists have never found one shred of evidence that proves evolution. Now, why did I say that when we're talking about this, when we're talking with Josh about this? Because that serves as the basis for, Darwinian evolution. I'll just say this is much like communism. There's, I'm going to skip that and just it's the theory of evolution is again a religion, but the idea that our planet was genetically seeded by an alien race or ETs is being seriously accepted by Nobel Prize-winning scientists and the scientific community in general. And this is why, if you go back and think about movies like Prometheus, this is why these movies are so popular. Since there's no evidence at all that evolution is true, evolutionists can solve that problem by claiming to have proof that an advanced alien race came to Earth really hundreds of millions of years ago and genetically seeded our world with a primitive man and woman. Now, by introducing this one very important element, the evolutionists imagine that they claim to have solved their problem. But who seeded the aliens world, for example, and who seeded the world, who seeded them? And we can go back, way back, but the important thing to remember, at least in my view, and then I'm going to be quiet and turn it back over to Josh and Joe, is that the scientific community in growing numbers, and theologians especially, and even the Vatican, have embraced different aspects of the idea I just spoke about. People can always say that it was God who sent the aliens to here in the first place. But you're going to be hearing more and more about this, and this is part of the deception that's going to infiltrate and has infiltrated the Christian community, the churches, that really originated with the Darwinian type of theory and religion. And subconsciously, people are being indoctrinated to accept this and to accept this alien deception, and therein lies the problem. So many people are, in my view at least, in my brain, investigative brain, many people are going to be sucked into this alien deception, and Josh Peck is the guy that will explain it and say, look, this is what's really going on. So that's why this is so important, such an important topic. It is very topical and very newsworthy. Joe, did I explain that all right? Or Josh, let me ask you, did I explain that okay? Kind of the foundation?
Yeah, you explained it that great. I think that was a better explanation than I gave in the book.
Wow. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure people understand we're not talking just to talk about aliens, UFOs, and stuff of fantasy here. There's a reason we're talking about this, because there will be a deception presented to us so great that unless you know what Josh is talking about, unless you understand and get on board that we're going to be deceived, that there's lie after lie after lie that these globalists are pushing down our throat, we are going to that chasm we were talking about before is going to widen even further, and we're going to be left behind and I don't mean that in the movie Rapture kind of way. I'm talking about Left Behind in terms of the real truth to the matter. So go ahead, Josh, continue, and I'm going to be quiet.
Oh no, you're fine. But yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. It is really important for the day and age that we're living in, and this alien deception is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. More and more people are finding it easier to accept, and the scary thing is, it takes little to no evidence whatsoever for people to buy into this stuff, and especially with the.
Yeah, I said exactly. Sorry, Josh. I don't know if we're having some sound issues here, but yeah, I apologize. I'll let you go.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, you guys are cutting out a little bit on my end too, but yeah, like our world is so skeptical that if you mention God, I mean, we all as Christians we all know how well that goes usually, But if you mention aliens or something like that, that's just fine, in the world. That's a perfectly acceptable belief to have. But unless you're talking to another Christian or a really open-minded person, a belief in God is almost looked at as infantile or like, believing in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or something. But, I mean, I fully and wholeheartedly believe there's far more evidence to support a belief in God creating us and the universe than there is for aliens, extraterrestrials creating us. I mean, the only thing that we really have as far as evidence is just their own testimony, because that's what they say. And, nobody really thinks to test them. Nobody calls their bluff or anything. They just take what they say for truth and go with it. Yet those same people are, seem to be pretty skeptical of things like the Bible and everything. So it is an increasingly important topic to discuss. The more that things like the ETH is being accepted, and the more skeptical the world is being of religion and especially Christianity. But yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more on that.
Well, we have just a few minutes left before our break, our top of the hour break, and on the other side, Josh, when we come back, I want you to get into anything that you found or learned in the process of writing this book, and what you think are the important points that we need to focus on that from your findings here, because there's a lot in here, and as I said, I've only been able to read about half of it, but there is so much to go through. And, in the show description, my dad writes here, some of the questions, what is our true origin? How do we prepare for what is ahead? And these are, kind of all across the board. Our higher dimensions interacting with our own. That's something that we've talked about, from your previous book, Quantum Creation, the different layers of the dimensional realities that we live in, but only being able to see a three-dimensional world due to our spiritual nature at the right now, but the veil seems to be thinning. People seem to be having more dreams, more visions. More people seem to be coming, awake to the Lord. You have miraculous conversions and things happening, and the Spirit of the Lord moving through people that don't even or didn't even believe in God in the past. So on the other side of this break, we'll get into the important points and things that you learned while working on this project. Again, folks, our guest is Mr. Josh Peck. His book is Cherubim Chariots, Exploring the Extradimensional Hypothesis. It includes interviews with Chris Putnam, Sharon K. Gilbert, and Douglas Woodward. The foreword is by Mark Flynn, and it is a excellent read when looking into what we see, the chariots, the cherubims from the Garden of Eden to the Tower of Babel, all the way through history, how angelic and extra dimensional. The Hagmann Hagmann report on this Friday, the 13th of March 2015. We're joined live by Josh Peck, author of Cherubim Chariots, Exploring the Extra-Dimensional Hypotheses. Josh, I see that you called in via the phone line. Did you want to switch over to that?
I called in through Skype. It's cutting out a little bit, but I don't know. What do you think I should do?
No, I mean, we're fine. I thought I saw your number in the queue. I thought you had called in on the phone. I must have mistaken. This must be somebody in your area.
Yeah, it's not me. My phone's off.
All right. Well, let's continue with this interview. The question I asked before the break. While writing this book and working on this project, what was some of the more important things that you learned, or things that stuck out at you as very important?
Well, the main important thing that really came out in this book was how much more the extra-dimensional hypothesis makes sense than the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I mean, it's not. It doesn't only explain what the UFOs are, but it explains their pilots as well. That's probably the most important thing because, I mean, it has applications all across the board. Even when you're witnessing to somebody, you know, doing the kind of research I do, I have. There are times that I have discussions with people that are really entrenched in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, so they believe in, you know, aliens from other planets and UFOs and, you know, directed panspermia and all that stuff. So I one thing that I found is if you can, most serious UFO researcher will have at least heard of the extra-dimensional hypothesis. So if you can get them on that page and start talking to them a little bit about it, and if you can get them to accept that it's at least a possibility, you're one step closer in being able to witness to them, to show them that there is actually a real God that put all this stuff in place, and that these things aren't from other planets, they're from a higher dimension. But I mean, it's really just it's Occam's razor. You know, whatever is the simplest answer is usually the correct one. If these things are from another planet, there's a lot of questions that come up. You know, I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that they were the aliens were telling abductees that they were from planets like Mars and Venus. But now that we have the technology to be able to actually look at those planets, especially Venus, and show that there's no way that life is going to be possible there, now they're changing their story and saying that they're from further away, you know, usually like Zeta Reticuli or something like that, places that we have no way of being able to vet their story. So that has to be answered. Why do they keep changing their story? But also, just for them to get here, I mean, you'd have to break just about every law of physics that's known. But with the extra-dimensional hypothesis, it wouldn't really require, it wouldn't have to require any technology actually for them to get here. Like I know we talked about this when I was on your show before, but I just to recap in case people missed that, so they know what we're talking about. The best way that I found to understand what higher dimensions are is by using lower dimensional examples. So if there's a hypothetical two-dimensional universe called Flatland, all it has is the X and the Y axes. There's no up or down. And how would somebody like us, a three-dimensional entity, how would we explain ourselves or interact with a Flatlander? If we stuck our finger in Flatland, how would that look to them? You know, they would see a point just appear, you know, in front of them that would expand into a line, you know, which actually would be a circle, but from their perspective, it would be a line, and that would just grow in size, and then it would get smaller and disappear when we pull our finger out. So for us to breach a two-dimensional universe, that would require really no technology. But it's interesting that when we look at what that kind of interaction would look like, we're seeing the same things with a lot of UFO reports. We see UFOs that are in two places at once, or they appear out of nowhere and disappear. Things like that really just scream that these are extra-dimensional beings and craft, not extraterrestrial. And I mean, it's just a simpler explanation that seems to make more sense, and most importantly, it falls right in line with the Bible. I mean, you could just replace the word spiritual or heavens or anything like that with extra-dimensional existence, and it's exactly what we're looking at. Like I said earlier, those terms are synonymous. So especially in witnessing or trying to get somebody out of this alien deception and trying to at least give them a chance, add another option. You can use science to explain biblical things, and I talk a lot about that in quantum creation, but I deal with that in this book too, because a lot of people that are heavily entrenched in this stuff, they're going to be more scientifically minded. Not a whole lot of them are really going to be too religious. If they are, it's usually New Age or something like that. But so if you can speak to them in terms that they can understand, not saying that they're stupid or anything, just it's just different terms. It really helps in getting them out of this deception. But yeah, that's the most important thing, is that there is a deception, and it's incredibly attractive to a lot of people, and a lot of people find it easy to be convinced of this with little to no evidence at all. So it's important that we as the church have an answer for these people when they ask, or when we are presented with an opportunity to talk to them. So just a broad stroke over the book, that was the most that really was the most important point with this whole book.
Fantastic. It's interesting explanation, by the way. Flatlanders and the dimensionality, folks. To me, you've got to kind of use your imagination, I suppose, to visualize this, and it's difficult sometimes on radio to convey these concepts, but you do a great job at this. Absolutely do a great job at this. Joe, go ahead, because I know you've got a list of questions there and a list of issues, the different things based on the book.
I wanted to talk about the ancient technology, Chapter 3, Josh. You talked about ancient technology and antiquity, and you talk about the not only the biblical accounts, but extra biblical accounts of the from the non-canonical books of the cherubim and these extra dimensional beings interacting with humans, and what Ezekiel saw. We know that a lot of, according to Ezekiel, technology was passed to the human race before the flood, and you write in here, watchers brought other supposed gifts to mankind, technological knowledge, and you go on to say, Chapter 7 of the book of Enoch begins to describe what type of knowledge the watchers brought with them from heaven, and it goes on to quote this, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and defile themselves with them. They taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. That's chapter 7:33 of Ezekiel. It goes on to say that the knowledge of the roots of the plants is important for a bit later, but the description handed down from the watchers is continued in chapter 8. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, make known to them metals of the earth, the workings of them, bracelets, ornaments, the use of beautifying the eyelids, all kinds of costly stones, coloring trinkets. And it goes on to say that much godliness arose from this. And let me see. Let me get to the point here where I'm trying to make. And you go on to say that technology was what was handed down to the humans from the ancient ones, or the fallen ones. And this technology might have been, a slower technology, but you asked the question: was there a type of technology that we see today in the pre-flood world? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there were similar technological capabilities pre-flood?
Yeah, I think the type of technology that they had back then was actually more advanced than what we have today, but not in. I don't think in the way that a lot of people usually think. Like some people that are really into the ancient tech theory, they envision like flying spacecrafts and things, pre-flood, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to completely knock that. It's an interesting idea, and it could be, but I think they were even more advanced than that. I think that they realized with their technological advancements how much the occult really plays in with that. And I actually think that, I think that's where we're headed. I think we're on track to repeat that. I mean, they're about to fire up CERN again, and whether they realize it or not, I know this is something that we talked about on the show before too, but whether they realize it or not, they're opening portals to the spirit world, to higher dimensions. The occult is heavily entrenched in technological advancements, and and I'm not saying that everybody that makes a discovery is doing it for malicious reasons or malevolent reasons or anything, but I think that the influences of a lot of these discoveries are actually extra-dimensional. I think that they come from what we would call fallen angels and demons and things like that, just like it was before the flood. And in the Book of Enoch gives a great account of that. And so I think that we're on track to repeat that, and that's why it's really important to understand this. But I think that if we were able to look back to what technology would have looked like in the pre-flood world, I think that to us it would have looked more like occult rituals and magic and that kind of stuff, what we would think of that. But I do believe that actually is technology. I think that they were able to do a lot. I mean, the Tower of Babel, according to the Book of Jasher and Genesis and other books out there, I mean, that basically was an interdimensional portal. They were trying to reach heaven. And even God himself in Genesis says that whatever. Well, I'm paraphrasing here, but they're going to be able to do what they're trying to do. They're going to be able to traverse these dimensions as it would seem they were trying to do. So, but I don't think that they were using. I don't think that they would have had to have like circuit boards and that kind, that type of technology that we have today. I think that they were far past that. I think that they realized that they're with whatever occult rituals that are there and things that certain groups are even doing today. I think that they were able to use that to access these things and to make things happen. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay, Josh. Paul McGuire has his new book, Mass Awakening, which I had the honor of doing the foreword for. He notes that mankind, all of us, we're going to be experiencing a mass awakening of both a supernatural and scientific nature that's going to just radically impact the evolutionary theory, theology, all of the world's religions and philosophies and belief systems, and that scientific evidence has been covered up for really centuries that suggests that planet Earth, that where we live was visited by ETs. Now, your definition of these ETs really matches his as interdimensional beings, perhaps seeding the Earth with their DNA millions of years ago. Now, this is this alien genesis theory. It's going to fundamentally change every aspect of our society. But what he gets into this, and I think that this is kind of where you guys kind of converge on points. There's going to be a return, if you will, of these beings. And in so doing, it's going to be mankind's greatest modern crisis. And this is why we're talking about setting up a new international order ruled by this charismatic world leader. The Bible calls that leader the Antichrist, one world religious system. And if we look at this through a larger lens, Jesus Christ warned of the return of, we'll say, the Nephilim in the last days, fallen angel technology. And I think you kind of touch on this in your previous books, the Tower of Babel, was that not a Stargate, an interdimensional portal of sorts, where that was a key part of the world's, at that time, the first one world government, one world economic system, one world religion at Babylon that was crushed by God. But are we not seeing or not preparing for this return of Babylon as predicted in the book of Revelation?
Absolutely, and there are other parts of the Bible that prophesy that too, especially Zechariah 5 talks about that. But yeah, I mean, we could look back. We can look back to the account in Genesis of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel and look at that as a type or a shadow of what's to come. Nimrod was the first Antichrist, or the first person that was afflicted with the Antichrist spirit, and I talk a lot about that in Disclosure, but we can look at that as an example, and Jesus even said too that just as the days of Noah are, that's the day, days of his return. Well, Noah was alive for 300 something years after the flood, so he very well could have been alive during the days of Nimrod too. So I think that factors in greatly. I think that what we're looking at ahead of us is a repeat of what happened at the Tower of Babel. It's just going to be more wide scale. There's more people on the earth today, but and I think the packaging's a little different. Back then they knew who these things were. They were other gods, and and that's lowercase g, not comparing them with the only true God, but today the packaging, the only difference is the packaging. Today they're aliens from another planet, and they're here to save mankind. But when we look at what they're doing the same things that they were doing back then. They have a hybridization program, and they're trying to integrate into our society without the majority knowing about it. So, I mean, that already is shady, just as it is. But the scariest thing is that people that believe in this stuff, who don't necessarily have a Christian worldview, they'll just accept it for what it is and think that it's a good thing, and think that they're here to save humanity, and those are the people that are going to be following the Antichrist and accepting the mark. So then we as the church have a responsibility to give people the information about this stuff now, while there's a chance that they'll hear it. If we tell them then, I think it's going to be too late. The strong delusion will already be activated, and I think we're seeing that already started now. But it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So we need to get on this stuff. We need to get on this stuff now. But yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at a return of these extra-dimensional beings that are posing as alien saviors from another planet, or wherever they want to say they're from. And the more that I look into this, I've tried to look at prophecy as unbiased as possible, and see what the interpretation that fits with all Scripture is. This alien deception thing is the closest thing I've ever found that really fits all the criteria. So I believe that's what we're looking at, and the advancement of our technology really has a big part to play. They're anticipating in 2045, and actually some sources are saying it's going to be even earlier now. The singularity event, or the event where we're gonna know so much that it's just unpredictable. We don't know exactly what the world's going to look like after that. I think that's the point. Whenever the singularity event is supposed to happen, I think that's the point when mankind is going to realize that technology and the occult, they go hand in hand, all these rituals and all this stuff. And that's when they're going to start petitioning these fallen angels again. There are some sections that are already doing that, in the occult today, and even in New Age and things like that. But I think at that point, that's when it's going to merge with technology and become like an accepted thing all around the world. So you add that with these these beings that, whenever they decide to present themselves to the world, however they're going to do that, you got a full blown deception. So it's good to jump on this stuff now while we still can.
Absolutely. And if we can, talking about some of the manipulations that happened when the Nephilim, in Genesis 6, we'll just reference it as that. We see some of these things today, and how much of your research shows any type of manipulation of plants? We see today American scientists attempt to modify the DNA of human egg cells using new gene editing techniques that could eliminate inherited diseases and from generations in infected families. How much do you think there were, the level of poisoning we see today in our water, air, and food, the manipulation of the seeds and of animals? Do you think that they were...
Joe, if I can kind of add to that question, because on our drive back from Florida, my wife and I were talking about this very thing that you just brought up. When the flood happened, Josh, not just the whole earth was wiped out, including whatever plants is plant life and animal life. And people, maybe a reasonable person would say, well, what did the poor animal do? With the exception of those brought onto the ark, what did the poor animal do to deserve being wiped out by a just God? Or what about the plants? Now, look at what we're doing today to the DNA of animals and plants. So I just wanted to add that to your question, Joe. So go ahead, Josh, and pick that up.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that kind of stuff was going on back then, too, because... Well, simply, it's happening now, and Ecclesiastes tells us that basically, and I'm paraphrasing again, but basically, if it happened before, we can be sure it's going to happen again. That's kind of butchering the text, but paraphrasing what it says. But I believe if we're looking at it now and we're seeing these types of manipulations going on and basically creating things that God never created, we're using we're using materials that God created for us, but we're using them in a way that he didn't intend. We're basically doing Satan's work, because that's exactly what the enemy was doing back in Genesis. Satan can't create anything of his own. He has to use what's available to him, which is God's creation, so he perverts it. I believe that's what the Nephilim were. God had made man in his image, and I think the enemy, being jealous as he is, he wanted creation, something in his image as well. So we had the Nephilim, but he had to use materials that were already available. So mankind and fallen angel. But I believe that they were doing it with the plants too, and there are some. The Book of Enoch talks a little bit about that, and I think. If I'm not mistaken, Jubilees, the book of Jubilees talks a little bit about that too. But even in the Bible, in Numbers 13:23, it says, "And they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs." So those grapes were found in the land. Now, this is the post-flood giants, but it was in the land of the giants. Well, it doesn't directly say how big they were, but they were so big that it took two people with a staff between them to carry these things. And interestingly enough, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, their logo is that image of two people with carrying large grapes in between them. But so somehow they were the post-flood giants were able to create these large grapes, and I mean it might not even have to be a genetic manipulation. I mean, it could have been, but what I talk about in the book is how if they were able to create certain atmospheric conditions, such as what would have existed in the pre-flood world. They would have been able to grow them 2, 3, 4 times the size. So again, it kind of goes back to Occam's razor. But I do believe that that pre-flood they did have access to that type of stuff, genetic manipulations, and I think that Nimrod was actually did that to himself too. When you look at the Hebrew, and this is another paraphrase. I don't have the notes right in front of me, but it's in my book Disclosure if people are interested. But when you look at the Hebrew of how Nimrod became a mighty one in the earth, it seems to say that he did something to pervert himself, and there are even there's even like a slight hint that it might have been something sexual, like a type of sexual magic or something that sometimes we'll hear about groups taking part in nowadays. So that might have been how they did their genetic manipulation, and it might be more effective than what we're trying to do now. And I think if we give it enough time, and if we're around to see it, that we'll see the world start to adopt the old rituals, the old way of doing things, because it's more cost effective. That's going to be a major player in them accepting this, but it gets them to their goal faster. So I think that's what we're looking at. But yeah.
Wow. Indeed. Okay. Well, I'm just looking at this contemporaneously as well as. Looking at this, trying to equate what you're talking about with current events and recent historical events. And I was today, when I was reading your book, I was reminded of our involvement in Iraq when we occupied the territory where ancient Babylon was located. And the beginnings of the return of Babylon predicted in the book of Revelation. I mean, it's interesting to see that, and it's interesting to see us as a human race in this period of acceleration and convergence of really, as you put it, occult science perhaps, or just the occult and technology. And we can, really to understand this, we have to kind of put that side by side with the Bible, and as well as the extra books like Jubilees as well as Enoch. So I mean, it's interesting to see all this. But are we missing the mark here, Josh? Or are we straying off too far off the path here?
No, not at all. This all factors into what the whole extra-dimensional hypothesis are, and what this whole UFO phenomenon is all about. It all. I mean, this is the history of the entire thing. We could not be more on track if we tried.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure because we're not working with any script, folks. I mean, this is just a candid interview based on Josh's book, and folks, definitely visit Josh's website. If you go to hagmanandhagmann.com, on the right-hand side, there's information, program information. You'll see it right there, right above the player box there. And his website is ministudyministry.com. Just click on his name, and it'll take you directly to his website, ministudyministry.com. Josh Peck is our guest. Cherubim Chariots is his latest book, Exploring the Extradimensional Hypothesis. I got that right, okay. Is a subtitle, with a foreword by Mark Flynn. And I equate you to Mark Flynn. Your mind really works the same way as his does, but you really get into some good stuff here. But go ahead and continue. Take us wherever you want to take us at this point.
Sure. Well, one when we're really looking at the history of this UFO phenomenon, I actually think that it really starts in the Garden of Eden, and there's a lot more to that story than and I if I remember right, I think the last time that I was on your show I gave a little taste of that, but there's a lot more to that story than what a surface reading of the text in the Bible will tell us. But I basically start the book with this. with what the Garden of Eden has to do with the whole UFO phenomenon and extra-dimensional beings and craft and all these things. And actually, this is the first time that we even hear of the cherubim, which is what led to the title Cherubim Chariots. Genesis 3:24. This is after the fall, after Adam and Eve took of the fruit of and were kicked out of the garden. Genesis 3:24 says, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." So what's really interesting about that is the word east. Most times when the word east is used, it's just talking about the compass direction, east. But there are times, it comes from the Hebrew word kedem. There are times that it actually has a more extra-dimensional definition. Sometimes it's translated as the word eternal. Like in Deuteronomy 33:27, it says, "The eternal God is thy refuge." And that word eternal is that same Hebrew word that's used for east. So that might help explain like an aspect of creation that's not commonly considered. It also says in Genesis 2:8 that the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And that word again, eastward, comes from kedem, and the word planted comes from the Hebrew word nada, which means established. Now, the whole point with this is I think this might be conveying the idea that the garden itself was originally established in a place outside of the dimensions of space and possibly even time that we can experience. A few years ago, I heard a teaching by Chuck Missler that and he just barely kind of mentioned it, but I thought it was really interesting. He said that it might be that Adam and Eve, when they were created, they may have had access to all the dimensions of space and time. So it wouldn't have just been, like we have now, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time that we can perceive, but they might have been able to experience all 10, 11, 12, however many there are. And I always thought that was really interesting. And the more that I looked into it, and especially with this eastward thing, the more I started considering that as a possibility, a strong possibility. When we look at what the sword that the cherubim has, it seems to say that the sword was really moving by itself, not that the cherubim were handling the sword. The Bible doesn't talk about that at all. It just says that the sword turned every which way. That sword might have been what caused the division in dimensions. So when mankind fell, I think it's at least plausible that they, in a sense, fell in their perception to the third spatial dimension, much like when the fallen angels, when they fell, I believe that they fell to the fourth dimension. They might, the fourth spatial dimension. They might still, there might be some kind of access that they have. I mean, it's a perception thing. That's how, in the book of Job, it says that Satan was able to basically go right up to the throne of God. But I believe that when they fell, their perception fell, just as ours did. So what that means for us is we not having access to the fourth spatial dimension and above. I think that what we're living in now, the physical world, the physical universe, is actually just a slice of a higher dimensional creation. We're basically the shadow. A lot of times we want to think of the spirit world as like the shadow world, where there's spirits and ghosts and stuff. But I the more I look into this, I think they're the real thing. We're the shadow. And so it really goes back to this Garden of Eden.
Would you say that this is a hologram, and Plato in the cave talks about this, doesn't he? Isn't this kind of we're touching on Plato the cave, and also the fact that we're kind of living in a hologram, or am I off base on this?
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, absolutely, and Mark Flynn talked about that in his book, which is a big reason why I loved it so much, and why I think he and I get along so well. But yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Well, it's like the flatland example. If I took a cube and set it down on flatland, to them it would just be a square, but that's actually just a very small section of a much larger object. The more I look into this, the more I think that's what all of reality is. Even when we in the book of Ephesians, it says that Jesus, from his perspective, he sees us already seated with him in the heavenlies. So I believe that we, if we're saved, if we have a relationship with Jesus, that we actually have an extra dimensional nature. We don't have access to it, right now, because we're in time. We're locked in the three dimensions of space and one in time that we can experience. But I believe that we actually do have extra dimensionality to us that will become fully realized when Jesus comes back. We get our new bodies, all that sort of stuff. But going back to Eden, there's been a lot of really interesting research by well more qualified researchers and authors than myself as to where the Garden of Eden was located. And a prevailing theory is that the flood would have wiped it off the map, or that it was taken to heaven, because in Revelation it talks about the tree of life and in heaven. But I actually, the more I looked into this, the more that I think that Eden, in a sense, is actually still on Earth. We just can't perceive it because it's in a higher dimension. It's been cut off from us. We basically could walk right through it and not even know that it's there. And I believe that that's how the tree of life is in heaven too. A lot of times we want to look at heaven as like a place up there, but I think all of creation, we're just a section of it. So in a sense, it is here. Like when the Bible talks about the Jerusalem above, the heavenly Jerusalem, and then the Jerusalem below, I don't think that they were just talking in terms of the z-axis up and down. I think it's higher in dimensions. In a sense, it would take up the same space, so that's kind of where I stand on that.
Interesting. Okay, and this does make sense. Because we often talk about things like our DNA and the harmonics of our DNA, and we sometimes think of the communication with God through prayer, and prayer does have when you think about prayer, and I'm not even sure how to describe this. You would be better at this than me, but you're communicating. Once you are saved and you accept Jesus as your Savior, there's something dynamic that changes within you, and there's a communication, interdimensional communication, if you will, that also affects your DNA. And I think it's, in the end, it all comes down to DNA and our blood, actually, too. But that's a different concept, different matter. But just talking about the DNA and the communication with God. So you're looking at this interdimensionality, until death, until physical death, at which point, we lose that anchor, the human anchor, and are able to slice through the dimensions. I don't know if I explained that right or if that's even close, but it sounds good to me.
Yeah, you're, in my opinion, you're right. You're right on track. I mean, that I couldn't have said it better myself. I know I say that a lot to you, but it's true. Like, you know, and you know, looking at prayer as an interdimensional communication really does make a lot of sense too when we think about the tactics of our enemy, because for everything that God has, our enemy has an evil and inferior duplicate. There are occultists out there that will do certain rituals and things to try to breach dimensions, or to try to, you know, call up demons or fallen angels and that sort of thing. That's the inferior. That's the antithesis of what God put in place for us with prayer. We don't have to do all those rituals and all those weird things. You know, we don't have to do any of that. We just talk to him. You know, he's our dad. We just talk to him. He dwells in our spirit. There's none of that other stuff involved that we need to do. So I really like that. I like that description of thinking of prayer as a interdimensional communication. I think you're right on track with that.
Well, cool. Once in a while I get something halfway right anyway, you know. But all right. Well, okay. You know, let's go back to the cherubim. Okay, that's the way I pronounce it. What is it? Cherubim? What's their role with respect to mankind? I mean, I know that we touched on this. We covered a little bit about this, but who are the cherubim precisely, and what's their role in our current affairs?
Yeah, definitely. That's you know, that's the first question that I really tackle in the book, because it's the most important. You know, I see it as there's two types of cherubim. There's the godly ones and the fallen ones. You know, when in the Bible, when it talks about how there are angels that fell, it's not specific as to what class. I actually think that angels, probably from every class, at least a certain amount of them fell. But it does refer to Satan as, you know, that fallen cherub and things like that. So we know at least Satan is that's the class of angel that he is or was. But it really goes to their purpose. You know, a lot. You know, in our reality, we classify things by how they look. It looks like a chair, we'll call it a chair. You know, it looks like a table, it's a table. But it seems in the spirit world, or especially with classes of angels, that they're more defined by their job or their purpose, like why they were created. And because physical descriptions of cherubim vary, they always seem to be a type of amalgamation of human appearance and animal appearance, but it always they seem to vary. So, but the job seems to be the same all throughout. It's to protect, even and you know, we see that in the Garden of Eden. Those cherubim were sent to protect the way to the Garden of Eden, so Adam and Eve couldn't, you know, have access to the tree of life. And there's cherubim around the throne of God. But so that's their job, is to protect, and actually even the surrounding nations of ancient Israel, the surrounding nations understood that. I believe people actually had real interactions with these things. There are palaces in ancient Babylon and Assyria that they have their cherubim. How, you know, what the biblically, but they call them things like Lamassu and Shadu. They had different words for them, but they're basically they're cherubim. They have the body of a lion or an ox, and then a human head. Sometimes there'll be like a snake for a tail, or, you know, there's some kind of, there's an amalgamation like that. There are other places where instead of having an animal body and a human head, it'll be reversed, and there'll be like a human body and an animal head. And that's especially prominent in the book of Ezekiel in the first chapter. but that's basically what the cherubim are. They're a class of angel. If there's an angelic hierarchy, they seem to be like the top of the top. And some are fallen, at the very least Satan, but more, most likely there's more than just him too, as far as that specific class. But I think that they still retain their jobs, just it's more skewed now. I think that, whether a cherubim is fallen or not, their job is still to protect. The godly ones are going to protect God and the things of God, but the fallen ones are going to protect the enemy. I think Satan himself, he's just going to protect himself. But I think that's what we're looking at. That's basically who the cherubim are.
Very interesting. You talk about these flying vehicles in the book, and I think you use would it be the Indian word that is used? It's oh goodness, it starts with a V.
Yeah.
Vana Vamana.
Vamana. Yep.
Vamana.
Yep.
That's right.
Can you explain what these Vamana are from your findings?
Yeah, and I'm really glad you asked that too, because this is something that a lot of the people that promulgate the ancient astronaut theory, they'll use this as evidence for that, and they'll say, well, see, they saw extraterrestrial craft even in ancient times. But when we look at the descriptions, these are not extraterrestrial. These are absolutely extradimensional. And I do believe that I kind of look at these texts as like just history. I don't get any spiritual guidance, from them, and I would never suggest that to anybody. But and really even the same with books like Jasher and Enoch and stuff. But I think that we can look at them as history books or records of encounters that people had. But a good place to start is the Mahabharata. It's an ancient Sanskrit epic that talks a lot about the ancient history of India. It's an extremely large text. It's about 1.8 million words. But we find a lot of descriptions of chariots, but both terrestrial and celestial, or as I would say, extra-dimensional. So they did understand the difference. In the Mahabharata, there's a particular chariot called the Pushpaka, and when we look at the etymology of that word, what really stands out is one of the meanings of the word Pushpaka can mean a kind of serpent. So I thought that was interesting in regards to the serpent in the Garden of Eden and stuff. But aside from that, there's a description of this thing from the Mahabharata. This says, and he rode on that beautiful and sky-ranging chariot called the Pushpaka that was capable of going everywhere at the will of the rider. So from that we get that it's sky-ranging. So this is a flying craft. It's not just a regular, chariot with wheels pulled by horses. And the Pushpaka we even get the origins of this thing. And the Lord of Treasures sat on that excellent seat, the elegant Pushpaka constructed by Vishwakarma, painted with diverse colors. Now, I make a connection in the book between the serpent of the Garden of Eden and Vishwakarma. And what's really interesting is, let me find it here, one of the descriptions of Vishwakarma, let me find it real quick. Here we go. He's the deity of craftsmen and architects, and I think that's really interesting in connection with Freemasonry. That their deity pretty much has the same moniker attached to him, but. So that leads into what Vamanas are, and like I said before, a lot of the ancient astronaut theorists will point back to these Vamanas and say that they were extraterrestrial. But when we look at the descriptions, there's no way. They're talked a lot about in the Bhagavata Purana. Vimanas themselves are mentioned a little bit in the Mahabharata, but really in the Bhagavata Purana, they're all over the place. So one of them here, and I'm probably going to butcher some of these names, but I'm going to do my best. As Dundhukari spoke, a brilliant Vimana flew down from the sky, soft as the petals of a rose. In it were many eternal dwellers in Vishnu's realm, Vaikuntha. Dundhukari embraced his brother Gokarna and climbed into the ship of the sky. So that Vimana is described, it's extra-dimensional. It's described as flying, but also carrying the eternal dwellers from Vishnu's realm. So we learn that it has physicality to it, since Dundhukari was actually able to climb inside. So based on that description, it's also not a dream or a vision. This is something that was actually witnessed. Let me find it. There's one that was really interesting that I wanted to make sure to read. Let me find it real quick. Oh yeah, here we go. Wondrous Alaka, city of the king of the Yakshas and Guyakas, lord of the nine treasures, one of the Lokapalas, the masters of the earth, fairly swarms with Vimanas, which look like immense flying jewels, cut like faceted discs, which fly more quickly than light or time. So that to me is a really interesting description, because it says that they look like flying jewels, so they're shiny. They're cut like faceted discs, so they're disc shaped. But really interesting, they fly more quickly than light or time. Nothing physical can do that. I mean, Einstein was able to show if you could even approach the speed of light, which that alone is already impossible, but if you could even do that, you would need infinite energy and you would have infinite mass. The only thing that can do that is a photon, because it is light, but time would also stop. So for something to fly more quickly than light or time, if you were able to travel faster than the speed of light, you would be going backward in time. There's just no way around it. That's the consequence of it. So they were talking about this thousands of years ago in the Bhagavata Purana, and they were saying that that's what these things were doing. So the only way that that's possible is if they were extra-dimensional. The extraterrestrial hypothesis, in my opinion, doesn't explain this at all. So yeah, basically Vimanas were these extra-dimensional craft that were flown by extra-dimensional beings, calling themselves gods and creator gods. They were telling the ancient Indians that they were it. They never mentioned Yahweh or any the one true God. So again, we have the same thing today. It's just different packaging. We instead of other gods, it's extraterrestrials that are telling us that they created us, and they're not giving any credit to the one true God, Yahweh. Yeah, so that's how Vimanas fit in. And I give a whole lot of other examples and a lot of other connections in the book in regards to Vimanas. I really wanted to have a focus on that, because it's so prominent in ancient astronaut theory. It's important for us to have an answer to it. And all you got to do is look at the text, and it's clear to me, and I think anybody that looks at it unbiasedly, it's clearly describing an extra-dimensional craft.
I got to tell you, Josh, you packed a lot of information in 200 pages. There are no wasted words or wasted space in your book. It's an amazing read, and folks, for what's coming, for what it lies ahead for all of us, and even for what we're experiencing today, to some extent, Josh Peck's work is very relevant to me. I mean, today, and it answers a lot of questions as to the type. no one likes to get lied to. No one likes. If you've ever raised teenagers, and I'm talking to the people out there, if you've ever raised a teenager, you come to expect certain amount of lies from teenagers, because we've all done it, as teenagers and stuff. So you come to expect that, but there's degrees, in the deception that we're facing right now is so critical, not just to our physical existence. Yes, that is the case, but also to our eternal salvation. And that's what we're talking about here today, folks, in case you haven't. And I know most people have connected this. So our guest, Josh, we're at the top of the hour here. We're going to break for a little bit. Our guest is Josh Peck. He's a fantastic researcher. He's an author. As you know now, folks, a great speaker, dynamic speaker in terms of really how to explaining very difficult subjects, but making it so you can understand it. Folks, you're listening to a live edition. It's Friday, the 13th, March 13th, 2015, edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Once again, our guest, Josh. The Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Our guest tonight is Mr. Josh Peck. He is an author, a speaker, all-around great guy, friend of the show, friend of ours. We've had the pleasure of meeting him. He's the author of Quantum Creation and his latest book, Cherubim Chariots, exploring the extradimensional hypothesis. And my dad writes in the show description, is there an alien deception in our future? Will it be at the hands of the New World Order, the global elite? Are we close to some type of announcement that aliens are among us? You want to know a secret, Joe? I took that off of Josh Peck's website.
Doesn't surprise me a bit. Josh, welcome back in this third hour. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know we mentioned CERN earlier. This ramping up that they're doing now, some say that they're trying to open some type of portal or extra-dimensional hole where they can unleash hell on Earth and bring these ancient sleeping ones, the mighty ones, back on Earth. Some say that they're trying to find, the particles to be able to destroy matter or break down the frequencies that hold us together, the God particle. Is CERN working towards, in your mind and your research, are they working towards an alien deception, being able to pull that off? Or are they working towards being able to break down matter at a level that they think is godlike?
Yeah, well, regardless whether they know it or not, I think that is what they're doing. And what I mean by that is I'm not sure if they're going into this knowing exactly what they're doing, because a lot of them have even come forward and admitted they have no clue the kinds of things that they're messing around with. So I don't know if they're only being influenced without their knowledge from the enemy, from fallen angels and things that are leading them to do this, or if they've already been in contact with those entities and if we're already seeing a repeat of even pre-flood times where they're following the lead of these beings all knowingly and wholeheartedly. But whether they realize it or not, that I think that's exactly what they are doing. This kind of stuff, I mean, they're looking for extra dimensions. They say, and I believe this is probably partly true. They say that it's the main purpose is to try to find the theory of everything, how to put all of the forces, including gravity, into an equation that makes sense. I think that's part of it, but I think that whether they know it or not, they're going into other dimensions to petition fallen angels, just like in the days of Nimrod. Now, the kind of scary thing is that CERN's been shut down for a while. They want to amp up the power, basically, and go at it even harder. And I think that they've already created portals to other dimensions and things. I'm sure things have come through. I don't know if they know it or not, because again, our perception is, 3 of space and 1 of time. So if an entity of 4 dimensions of space came through, we might not see it. Basically, the only way we'd see it is if they want to be seen. We can just look at the flatland example, to explain that, or to make sense of that. A flatlander's only going to see me if I put myself in front of him, so it's my choice. The same could be said for fallen angels. But so yeah, I don't know if they know what they're doing. Well, I know that they don't know what they're doing, but whether their motives are purely scientific or if there's something more nefarious going on, I'm not sure. But just in terms of their motives, but really it doesn't matter if they know about it or not, because what they're messing around with I think that this is just one step closer to that singularity event where we just don't know what's going to happen. So they are breaching extra dimensions, and only God knows what's gonna come through. Another current thing that's being researched now and will probably be available in the next coming few years or so is something called quantum computing. And I remember when I first heard about that, I really didn't. I actually kind of thought it was a cool idea. I didn't really see the harm, but basically what it is it's taking computing speeds and putting them on a quantum level using quantum entanglement. And what quantum entanglement is, it's basically the ability of 2 particles to communicate with each other at faster than light speeds. It's actually at an instance. When Einstein said a spooky action at a distance, he was referring to quantum entanglement. It's something we really know nothing about. It's something that should be physically impossible. It's communication between 2 particles. They could be on opposite ends of the universe, but somehow they're able to communicate at an instant. I kind of have my own idea about that, how that could be physically possible, but I'll probably be getting into that more in my next book, a follow-up to Quantum Creation, Cosmic Creation. But I
don't know how you do that, Josh. I don't know how you write, man, and coherently write so many books, but you do it well. I just want to say that you're already working on the next book. Wow.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I gotta. It's all God. I can't take too much or really any credit for it, because I can't come up with this stuff on my own. It's God. But yeah, so quantum computing is just taking quantum entanglement and trying to make processing speeds that fast. Communication between 2 computers or really anything at an instant. I think that the speeds that we have now are pretty fast, and look at the kind of harm that we're doing with it now. Imagine if it was at an instant. But not even that. We don't know what we're messing around with. We don't know why they're able to communicate like that, what kind of power is being used. We don't know what could happen when we tap into that. So that the more that I've been looking into quantum computing, the more and more I think it's a dangerous idea, and I don't really think that the governments of the world, I don't even think the governments of the world are equipped to handle the technology we have now, let alone the types of things that would be possible with quantum computing. And they're already getting pretty close to that. I mean, another example is recently they've been able to get actual teleportation to work it's on a quantum level. They I believe it was just an electron, but still they understand the principle of it now. From my understanding, the only way that that's possible is to use extra dimensions to transport, something from one place to another. So now we're sending things into other dimensions. How's that gonna look when we start doing that on a macro scale and you know start transporting humans across the world or even across the universe. So I mean all these things that they're looking into now and that are actually possible now, they're leading to I think some really dangerous territory, and CERN, you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean that's the one that's getting the most media coverage now, so it's definitely important for people to research and to be able to talk about and have opinions about. But yeah, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're heading into a very unfamiliar world.
Kind of like hold my beer and watch this kind of thing. You know, it's or sitting me in front of the controls of the radio controls. Yeah, not a good idea. Or you just never know what you're going to get. Yeah, I understand that. In your book, and I'm kind of, maybe I'm taking us off track a little bit, but what I found interesting as I was reading through your book, you know, there's always a connection. And as much as I try not to, well, I shouldn't say I don't try. There's always a connection between the Third Reich, Hitler, and the occult and dabbling into portals and other dimensions. Can you talk? Can you address that a little bit? I mean, I know it might not be. I mean, it fascinates me to think that during World War II and during the Third Reich era of Nazi Germany, that they were dabbling into certain things that we have exploited since then. So go ahead and just, if you don't mind, address that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up too, because that's right on point with what we're talking about. I think that the whole Nazi regime is a good example of the enemy trying to jump the gun. I think they were trying to get things started a little faster than it's meant to. But you know, I always thought it was so interesting how technological they were. You know, they made great advancements in technology, yet they're really occultish too. I think it's because they understood that connection, that where, like I talked about earlier in the show, where the world is headed to a place where technology and the occult are going to be basically one and the same, just as I believe it was back in the days of Nimrod. You know, the enemy understands that. They were the ones that taught humanity that in the first place, and they're going to do it again. And I think that with the whole Nazi regime, they tried to get that started early, but earlier than, you know, God's perfect timing, I guess. But yeah, I mean everything that happened back then, the technological advancements and integrating technology with all the occultic rituals and all that stuff, I think that's a perfect example of what the world is headed to. And I actually think that's a shadow of it. Just as Nimrod and the Tower of Babel was a shadow of where the world is headed, I think everything that happened with the Nazi regime is another shadow of where the world is headed. We have an Antichrist figure, Hitler. You know, obviously there's a Holocaust, and whoever is afflicted by this Antichrist spirit, that seems to be one of the major characteristics is the want for the total annihilation of Jews. That's exactly what we saw. But yeah, with the interests of occult and technology and how they were blended, I think that's a precursor for what we're headed to now. You know, still a lot of physicists and stuff won't really talk too much about spirituality or religious things, but if you pay attention to the terminology that they use, they actually are talking about spirituality. They won't. Most of them will never call it that, but the terminology is the exact same. Well, the terminology is different, but the meaning is the exact same. Just as I was saying, how extradimensional and spiritual, they're basically synonymous. They do that a lot, and then there are some researchers and physicists that will just come out and that just talk about their new agey and occultish theories, and say, well, quantum entanglement shows that if there is a God, it's an impersonal force in the universe, and you can't really have a relationship with it because it doesn't have a consciousness, and all this weird stuff. But they're putting those interpretations and calling it science. That's not science. That's just an opinion. But I think that's that's where we're headed. It's definitely a very anti God future that we're headed into. But if we prepare for it now and we look into this stuff now, we can at least be ready for it and be prepared to give an answer for those who are going to need it in those days. The biggest thing is to realize that all this stuff with science and technology, even with a topic that seems as complicated as quantum physics, that's a lie. It's not that complicated. The concepts are. I mean, I can understand them. I'm just some 30-year-old guy from Southeast Michigan. I have no training in this. I'm not a scientist at all. I'm nobody special in those regards. And once we get rid of all that scientific terminology that they try to throw in there to make it seem more complicated, so we'll just follow what they say. Once we get rid of all that and decide to have a mind for ourselves and just look at it with our own interpretations, I would suggest biblical interpretations. The concepts of these things are really easy to understand, and that's pretty much why I do what I do now. Trying to wake people up to I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just to wake people up to realize you don't have to be a genius to get this stuff. It's accessible to everyone.
All right, Josh, I hope you don't mind. We're getting a lot of questions from listeners, and folks, you can direct your questions if you go to hagmanandhagmann.com. Under the contact us, you can fill in that and just put on the subject line question. Or show question, whatever, but we'll lob them out here. Kind of like a box of chocolates, you just never know what you're going to get. Now, but they're all good. They're all good. A listener from Pikeville, North Carolina, wants to know this from you. And again, this is going to be off topic, perhaps, but nonetheless important. And frankly, this is a question I've got too. Listener from Pikeville, North Carolina wants to know, is the war in heaven going on now, presently? Have we reached the point where the evil ones are being cast down to earth? And I thought that was a pretty good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that the war started in the garden. It is going on now. The point where the enemy is going to be cast down to the earth, I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that, the foreshadowing of that. I think that's still a future event, in whole. But I think that we're starting to see the beginnings of that, especially with all these alien abductions and everything. That's exactly what these things are. When I think that they have access to our dimensions, but when they're cast down, they're going to be here with us. I don't think they're going to have access to the fourth spatial dimension anymore. So yeah, I would say that the war has been going on for really since the fall. So at least thousands of years, if not more. But yeah, it's getting a lot worse, and it's getting more into our own territory the more time goes on.
Interesting.
Josh, can you talk about the Revelation connection and the dimensional cycles, how you get into in your book about the four beasts of Revelation?
Yeah, let me pull that up. So when we first see these angelic beings, and Revelation calls these four beings beasts, but it doesn't have anything to do with the beast, the Antichrist. But these are actual godly, these are the good guys. The first description that we get of those are in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 1. And, that's if there is any extra dimensional account anywhere in the Bible, it is Ezekiel chapter 1. There are things in there that he describes that he just would not have known. Like, he wouldn't have known to describe them that way unless he actually witnessed them. He talks about how these cherubim, they were melded together. They shared, and this is in Ezekiel, not Revelation, but we're heading there. So I'll get to that in a moment. But Ezekiel talks about how the cherubim, they're melded together. They basically share a leg. Their wings are melded together. All these, even the faces. This gets into Dave Flynn's work as well, which I reference a lot throughout the book. If anyone out there, if you're a fan of Dave Flynn's work, and you'll love this, you'll love this book because it's heavily influenced by his work. But yeah, the faces are kind of melded together. There's a half lion, half man face, which is what is on the cover of my book. But what I talk about in my book is what we're looking at here is an unfolding between dimensions, or it's actually at the very least a double unfolding. And again, the flatland example is just such a good, easy way to try to explain this stuff. It would be like if I had a cube, put it on flatland and they see a square. Well, if I wanted to show them the entire cube, I could unfold it. I could fold the sides down. So basically, once the cube is unfolded, it would look like a cross. But the flatlander would not be able to really put together that it's the cube shape, but they would have access to all the information that that the cube is actually made of. So if we have a hypercube or a cube of 4 spatial dimensions unfolded into our 3 dimensions of space, it's what's called a tesseract. It basically looks like a 3-dimensional cross with 2 extra arms. So it's made of 8 cubes. So now imagine if you were to take that tesseract and then unfold that again to 2 dimensions, down to flatland. If you wanted to try to explain a hypercube to a flatlander, well, then you're starting to get into things where some of the flaps would start overlapping and occupying the same space. That's exactly what we see in Ezekiel's vision. It's at the very least a double unfolding, if not more. But that's why these things are melded together, and they from Ezekiel's perspective, they look like that they're taking up some of the same space. In Revelation, we see these 4 beings again, but they're separate. They're not melded together. The reason for that is that John's in heaven when this is happening. He's able to see this from a higher dimensional perspective. He's seeing these things in their own natural habitat. Now John would still have, because he's human, he would still have a 3-dimensional perspective, but he's in a higher dimensional environment. And even he said he didn't know if he was in the body or the spirit. So we don't have access to that information, but we do know that he's looking at these angels in their own extra dimensionality. So because of that, he's able to see them actually. God doesn't have to unfold them, basically, so he can see them. He's just able to see them as they are, at least from a 3-dimensional perspective. But that's why they're not. That's why they don't have to be melded together or anything. They can be separate. That's also why I believe that they're the same beings, and a lot of people believe that's the same cherubim there that Ezekiel saw. One point that I did want to bring up too. This is a little bit off topic, but it has to do with the wheels that Ezekiel saw. When we look at a projection of a hypercube, a 4-dimensional cube, it's basically, from our perspective, it would look like a cube inside of a cube. Just like if you were to shine a flashlight over top of a cube onto flatland, they would be able to see the shadow from the top of the cube, but also the darker from the bottom of it. So it would look like a square inside of a square, basically. What's really interesting is Ezekiel describes a wheel within a wheel, and I didn't make this. I didn't make this connection. A good friend of mine, Dr. Michael Lake, he's the author of the Shinar Directive. I don't know if you guys have had him on your show or not yet, but if you haven't, you should try to get him on. He's an amazing author, brilliant, great speaker. But he brought up how Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel. He said, "Have you ever thought that might be a hyperwheel?" And I kind of smiled and I said, "No, I didn't, but I really wish I would have. I would have put that in the book." But I think he's onto. I think that he's actually onto something there. It's just further evidence that there is no way Ezekiel would have known to describe things in this way unless he actually saw them. So it's another extra-dimensional, evidence, and that's why I said if there's any evidence in the Bible of extra-dimensional existence, it's in the first chapter of Ezekiel. But yeah, that's the connection between Ezekiel and Revelation, and what the beasts of Revelation have to do with that. They're in my opinion, they're the same cherubim as Ezekiel saw. They're just in their own natural habitat when John sees them, so he's able to get a kind of a better look.
Okay. It's interesting, Josh, that you write about this, and this is the same topic or the same area in the Bible, Ezekiel. We have a listener from Tacoma, Washington, asking a question, and I found this on page 120 of your book about Cydonia, the face on Mars. The Patty from Tacoma wants to know if there is any connection between the face on Mars to what you're describing in terms of the book of Ezekiel. And here I found in your book, you want to touch on that for her?
Yeah, definitely. I believe there's definitely a connection. I believe that the face on Mars is depicting a cherubim. I don't know if it's the same one, like personality, wise. I don't know if it's the same cherubim that's being depicted on the face of Mars as Ezekiel, but it's at least the same type, because we see the same bisection of the human face and the lion face. From Ezekiel 1:10, it says, "As for the likeness of their faces, they four had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side." So we see there that it says that the face of the man and the face of the lion were both on the right side. And then later on, when in Ezekiel 41:18 through 19, and this was something that David Flynn, I got this from his work, but it says, and it was made with, this is talking about the future temple, it was made with cherubims and palm trees, so that a palm tree was between a cherub and a cherub. Every cherub had two faces, so that the face of a man was toward the palm tree on one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. So again, it's talking about like this bisected face, and that's the same features that we see in the face on Mars. So there's a definite connection there. Now, whether that face on Mars was, I believe that it was constructed by angels, but whether it was good angels for good reasons, or whether it was fallen angels to maybe try to elevate themselves in some way, give homage to themselves, I don't really know. It could even be an altar to Satan himself, because Satan is a cherub. He might have that bisected face when he's in his true form. I saw, as far as what the actual meaning of it is, the face on Mars, I really don't know. There have been a lot of interesting theories about that, but I'm still undecided. But I definitely do believe there's a connection there.
Okay, fantastic. All right. I'm just looking at, let me see here. Just grabbing some questions here. Let's see here.
I got an area I'd like to go into next. The goat head of Azazel and the topographical spaceman. and this is me jumping ahead in your book, Josh. I haven't even got this far in reading it, but in skimming over it, as you were just talking there, I stopped here in this chapter, and you talk about the hieroglyphs of a spaceman, and the speculation of the origins of what you say is extra-dimensional craft, or the Vimana. But you say that that the I guess you'd call them the hieroglyphs are only able to be viewed from an aerial view, and this is in a primitive time when man did not have the ability to fly. And you go into detail on talking about how the fallen ones fell in Mount Hermon, where they touched down into the earth and conspired to mate with the female population. The worst of these emails named Azazel, to whom the scapegoat of Leviticus was sent. And that's an interesting and awesome place in Leviticus to read and to understand. But Mount Hermon Spaceman, can you get into this a little bit? What some of these images mean? And I know people don't have the book, but if you do, let me go through some of your citations here. Or if you just search Mount Hermon, aerial
images, yeah, yes, right.
Yeah, you'll see some in the connections to Roswell. If you can get into these aerial hieroglyphs and what you think they were meant for, and who you think they're meant for.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the most out there things that I've probably ever come across so far, and I was apprehensive at first to even include it in the book because I didn't know if it was too out there. But I have a few people that I'm able to send early drafts of my book, other researchers and authors, people that I trust to give me their honest opinions, and I got the go ahead from them. So I figured that, well, maybe there is actually something here. But when you look at there are naturally there are man-made geoglyphs like in Nazca, Peru, where mankind has actually gotten together and created these huge depictions of things, and one of them is called the Spaceman or the Giant, which I think is interesting. And this is really where I started with this. And I didn't go really looking for this stuff; it just kind of all fell in my lap. But this giant or the Spaceman, the Nazca Spaceman geoglyph, it was man-made, but it shows this being. He has a strange, oddly shaped head, and he has his right arm raised, and it can only really be appreciated if viewed from the sky. Now, what's interesting is when you look at the topography of Mount Hermon, where where it's said in the Book of Enoch that 200 angels, they fell from heaven basically, and that's where they fell. If you look at and I actually have the coordinates here if people want to look at it in Google Earth. I'll just throw those out. It's Mount Hermon, 33 for this particular view. It's 33 degrees, 27, 38.21 north, and 36 degrees 04, 29.65 east. So if somebody wants to look at this on Google Earth, they can do that. And I give all the information in the book too, all the coordinates for this stuff. But when you look at the topography, the first thing that you can see is the actual head of a goat, miles and miles long, but this isn't man-made. This is actually in the topography. Like, man did not. It's not etched in. It's just naturally there. What's really interesting too is if you look at part of the head of the goat, and I give overlays in the book showing where all these things are, you can actually see a geoglyph, a naturally made geoglyph of a giant, I guess. It has an elongated skull, and its right arm is raised. So it's similar to the one in Nazca, except this is naturally made. This isn't man-made. So I remembered, I've been a fan of Dave Flynn's work for a while now, and I remembered that he had made a connection between Mount Hermon and Roswell. So when I was looking at this topographical spaceman on Mount Hermon, I thought, well, if there's a connection between Mount Hermon and Roswell, there should be one in Roswell as well. So I went on Google Earth and I looked at the topography above Roswell, and it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. I mean, it's not, you don't really have to use your imagination to see this thing, but right above, and I'll give the coordinates for this too if people listening want to view this on Google Earth. It's so it's Roswell, New Mexico, 33 degrees, 49, 21.98 north, and 103 degrees, 57, 49.23 west. So if you look at that, you got to zoom out, quite a ways, but right above Roswell is another topographical spaceman that's naturally made, and this one doesn't have an elongated skull. It has more of a bulbous skull that to me looks exactly like typical descriptions of a gray alien. And the interesting thing is this one also has its right arm raised. So once I saw that, I really had to be sure I wasn't just seeing these things. I mean, even though to me now, and maybe it's just because I've been looking at it so much, I mean, it's really easy to spot. You can even see the eyes and everything. But I had to make sure that I just wasn't just seeing these everywhere. So I checked
Kind of
some
like
other...
a Nazi salute, almost, right? Kind of like a Nazi salute?
Yeah,
maybe?
Yes, and I make that very connection in the book, and actually the first one to make that connection is a good friend of mine, Gons from Canary Cry Radio. I got to give credit to him because he was the first one that made that connection to the Nazi salute. But yeah, I talk about that in the book too, and how I think it has to do with this Antichrist spirit. But I checked other areas, Stevensville. I figured because the Stevensville light, maybe there was one there, but I didn't find anything. I checked in a bunch of other places where I would expect that if this was a reoccurring phenomenon. I even checked Mars and the moon, because you can do that with Google. Nothing. So as far as I know, these are the only two places that contain these things. But it was also a good test for me just to make sure that I wasn't just seeing this stuff. So. But yeah, I sent the stuff to Gons and asked him what he thought. He thought it was interesting, and then he made that connection with Hitler and the Nazi salute. So I looked into that as well, and that the whole Nazi regime is something I talked about in my book Disclosure. And we touched on it in this show as well. That Hitler was definitely oppressed by the Antichrist spirit, and it seems to be an indication of the future Antichrist. So what I think, what I think this is saying, it's one of two things. I don't know if this is a warning from God or if this is the enemy trying to boast. I don't know. I can only speculate, but in either case, I think that this is something that's saying it's pointing to the end time deception of the alien gospel and all that. I think that's why it's a gray alien figure in Roswell, which is modern day. But the one on Mount Hermon, which that happened thousands of years ago, the skeletons and things that have been dug up about what those would have looked like had the elongated skulls. So I think that this is a connection saying that, and I also talk about in the book that I believe that there's a connection with the Orion constellation, because that constellation too has its right arm raised. But also Orion was one of the names of Nimrod after the languages were confused. Basically, you would have had maybe 70 confuse the languages. They all would have had stories of the same guy, of Nimrod, but now they're speaking different languages, so they would have had different names for him. When you look at the stories of some of these people, it's the same story as Nimrod. So Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Orion, and a bunch of others, they're the same person. So Nimrod being the first type of Antichrist, or the first shadow of Antichrist, I saw a connection there with the constellation, with the right arm being raised, and then that goes back to Hitler, who with the whole Nazi salute thing. But I think that this is where it's coming from. I don't know if it's from God or the enemy. I don't know, but I think that this is pointing to the end time deception and saying that this is where that allegiance is going to lie. And I think that's what the whole right arm raised thing is about, is showing allegiance to the enemy or to the coming Antichrist. So if that's true, then this has been prophesied in the actual Earth, in the topography of the Earth for thousands of years. So there's a lot more in the book about that. That's just kind of the highlights, but yeah, that's basically what the topographical spacemen are, and what it has to do with what we're dealing with today.
If I may, what you write here in your book, just very quickly. The impressions or the aerial views, for example, the topographical images that you're referencing. You write that the fact that the Mount Hermon spaceman is found in the area where the Book of Enoch says the Watchers touched down, or they fell from heaven, for example, or they fell to earth. You're right. It is almost as if this very act burned a shadow into the topography of the mountain to add legitimacy to the event, much like the goat head can point back to Azazel. And I think that's just an amazing observation there. And then you write, and this, folks, this is where our programs connect like-minded and also extensive and very well-researched men. Think now with Steve Quayle, when we had him on with Tim Alberino, when I reference this. The Nazca spaceman is man-made. It is equally profound that it is found in an area of the world which is known for containing elongated skulls, as you just referenced there, that do not appear to be human. Given the fact that the Mount Hermon spaceman seems to have an elongated cranium, it would seem to point back to where, folks, Peru. This is where Tim Alberino is focusing his attention on, where many elongated skulls have been found, and where the Nazca spaceman can be found. Now, one other thing too that you went over quickly, but I want to just reinforce this point, folks. Remember, we talk about occult numerology. We talk about the significance of occult numerology, and it doesn't matter if you believe this. It matters that the other side, believes this. You write this: in the past, much study has been done on the connection between Mount Hermon and Roswell, New Mexico. Now, folks, think about this. David Flynn, he was the first to discover that Mount Hermon, using the old Paris Prime Meridian, and this is important, is located at, get this, 33.33 degrees latitude and 33.33 degrees longitude. And, of course, we all know that 33 has the number 33 is very strong occult significance. So, and you get more into this in your book, but it's just fascinating. And I just want to drive home the point, ladies and gentlemen, that when you're listening to Josh Peck, compare what Josh is saying to what Tim Alberino's research has been bearing out, and you're seeing this convergence of information here. Now, we can put the puzzle pieces together. Josh, before I go any further, I want to make sure that a question from a listener gets answered. I know the answer to this question, but just to reassure our listeners, and this is from Bell, wanting to know if you are, in fact, a Bible man of God, and you believe in that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Christian. I've accepted Jesus as my savior, and there was a time that I talked about on one of your shows too, that I fell away from the church for a little while, and but in my early 20s, but I've also rededicated my life to Jesus years ago. I'm definitely full-blown Christian. The Bible is my my only source of ultimate truth. And a lot of the stuff I talk about, well, really all of the stuff I talk about, I say in all my books to, don't take my word for it. Compare it against Scripture, pray about it, let the Holy Spirit reveal what He's going to, don't take my word for it. So, yeah, I'm definitely a Christian.
Yeah, I just, I knew the answer to that question, but just to reassure our listeners,
sure.
I just wanted to do that. Josh, we only have about 6 minutes of the program left. I can't believe how quickly this has gone by. Folks, if you want just a fascinating, well-researched and information-packed read, Cherubim Chariots by Josh Peck. Of course, go to HagmannHagmann.com, click on his name, and there it'll take you directly to his website, where I would urge everyone to grab this. This is a fascinating read. Take us wherever, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, take us wherever you want to, Josh, that we haven't covered that you think is important that we cover, whatever information that we might have missed.
Sure. Well, again, the most important thing with all of this that we're looking at is that we need to give an answer to people who might be seeking or who might be deceived by some of this stuff that the world is throwing at us. And I mean, if we think that it's bad now, it's just going to get worse. Now, that's not to try to fearmonger or put fear in anybody. The Bible tells us that we're not given a spirit of fear. So for us, that shouldn't be the reaction. But we do have a responsibility to look at this stuff for what it is, study it with an open mind, as unbiasedly as we can, and really let God lead how we're going to interpret this stuff, and not the world. And a lot of times, not even our pastors or religious leaders. We need to let God lead us through that. When we look at where technology is going, a lot of the world who really falls into this ETH stuff, or falls into the ancient astronaut theory, they'll look at the technology of the other beings or of the aliens, and they'll look at that and say, that's where the world is going. Wouldn't that be great if we had that kind of stuff? The problem with that is, in getting there, the world is dabbling in things that it really doesn't have any understanding of, or very little understanding. And every time that has been done in the past, it's been detrimental and has caused some pretty awful things. So we need to be prepared for that. But most importantly, we might not get another chance to discuss these things. We don't. The world is changing so fast. We don't know when we're gonna, if we're still gonna have the same kind of access that we have now to other people. Like now, I can just go on Facebook or email or chat rooms or whatever, and I can talk to people all around the world. We don't know if we're gonna have that same kind of access. But also, people are getting more and more deceived. The more time goes on, this delusion is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. We don't know how much more difficult it's going to be to talk to people, even just on a personal level, about these types of things. Because, they're already shutting their ears to it. Imagine how much worse it's going to be in the future. So we really need to jump on this stuff now. Time's short. We're not going to be able to forever. That's really the most important thing that I can really say about this stuff is there's no excuse to not look into this stuff and to not be able to provide an answer for people who ask. And if somebody asks a question you don't know, then tell them you don't know, but go and find the answer for them, because most likely they're not going to do it on their own. I've had a couple atheists here and there ask me a question about God, and sometimes I don't know the answer. But I know they're not going to go look for the answer on their own. So we have a responsibility to be that light to the world. That's what the whole Great Commission is about, and that's still active today, and it's still just as, if not more, important now than it was when it was first spoke. So I guess that's probably the best thing I could end on.
Well, I'll tell you,
it's been a fantastic show,
and you're at the tip of the spear, the tip of the informational spear, at least in my view, when it comes to issues, very complex issues. And folks, look, if you didn't follow some of our discussion tonight, please go back and re-listen to it. I know I will, because hosting the show and listening to it are two different things. Go ahead, Joe. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'll back up what you said. It's a fantastic read, Josh. Your other book, Quantum Creation, and another one before that I have that I've read. I can't even remember the name, but you have been doing some great work and coming on the show. The interviews have been fantastic. Your website is Mini Study Ministry. I'm sorry, I was reading that wrong. Mini Study Ministry. Folks, check out his website, Mini Study Ministry, and you can get sneak peeks at the book and a whole bunch of other things there. He has e-books, radio and television appearances, his blogs, video clips, a compilation of information that is needed and interesting. MiniStudyMinistry.com is Mr. Peck's website. Once again, our interview tonight was with Josh Peck. God bless you, sir, you and your family. I know you have a young one. We met your wife, and you guys have a great family.
Just a wonderful couple.
We're going to keep you in our prayers and keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me on. It's always a blessing, and you guys are in our prayers as well. And we just love you guys to death. So thanks again. This has been a blast.
Josh, thank you so much, and God bless, and give your wife and little one a hug from us. All right, folks.
Will do.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do us for tonight. Now, I'll tell you what, given the nature of the headlines this week, if there is anything that does happen of consequence over the weekend, check our website. We will take to air.
Yes, we will.
If something does happen, whether it be in the Middle East or domestically. Right now, we're at a moment's notice. Who knows for that 3 a.m. phone call. With that, I just want to say thank you to everyone, all of our listeners, all of our supporters. Thank you for your prayers, your emails, your cards, your letters. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And may God protect you and richly bless you.
Have a great night, everyone.